The power of silence, the most dangerous psychological weapon. Have you ever noticed how the quietest person in the room often controls it? They don't rush to speak. They don't try to convince. They simply watch, letting the noise burn itself out. And yet, everyone feels their presence. People glance toward them for approval. Their silence feels heavier than any voice in the room. That is not weakness, that is psychological warfare. Because silence, true silence, isn't emptiness, it's pressure. It forces others to feel it, to reveal themselves, to break first. You see, we've been taught that power comes from expression, from being loud, bold, articulate. But in the darker corners of psychology, the opposite is true. The person who can withhold, who can remain silent in discomfort, in conflict, in emotion, that's the person who controls the tempo of reality itself. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's a message so powerful that words can't compete with it. In this video, we're going to explore the hidden psychology behind silence, how it manipulates emotions, bends perception, and shifts dominance without a single word. By the end, you'll understand why silence can be the most dangerous weapon a human being can possess, and how you can wield it, not cruelly, but consciously, because once you master silence, you'll never chase power again. It will start to orbit around you naturally. Let's begin. How silence triggers the mind. Silence is not just the absence of sound, it's the absence of certainty. And the human brain hates uncertainty more than it hates pain. When a person speaks, we can analyze their tone, their words, their intentions. But silence gives us nothing, no cues, no structure, no control. It leaves the mind starving for meaning. So, what does the brain do when it can't predict? It starts creating stories. It fills the gaps. It begins to project fears, guilt, and assumptions into that empty space. That's why, during an argument, the one who goes quiet first often wins, because their silence doesn't look like retreat. That looks like confidence. It forces the other person to over-explain, overreact, overcome. In psychology, this is known as the discomfort of ambiguity, a state where the brain would rather believe something wrong than sit in silence with no answer. And the silent person knows this. They know that silence pulls secrets out of people. They know that, given enough quiet, others will reveal their insecurities without being asked. They know that the mind cannot stand still in stillness. It starts confessing. In interrogation rooms, skilled detectives use this principle constantly. After asking a question, they simply stare. They let the silence stretch. Seconds feel like hours, and the suspect, desperate to escape that psychological pressure, fills the void with information, often the truth. Because silence is not passive, it's active pressure, it's psychological gravity. Every second of silence says, I don't need your words to know what is happening. And that terrifies people. That's why most people rush to fill silence. They speak too soon. They reveal too much. They break their own armor, simply to make the discomfort stop. The person who can remain quiet in that moment, who doesn't flinch, doesn't justify, doesn't explain, becomes the dominant presence without lifting a finger. Silence turns the social battlefield into a psychological one, and on that battlefield, words are ammunition, but silence is nuclear, the psychology of presence. When silence commands respect, every person carries an invisible weight. Some people enter a room and disappear into the noise. Others walk in and the energy changes. Conversations soften, eyes shift, attention reorients. That's not magic. That's presence, and presence is born from silence. When you speak less, every word you do say gains weight. When you pause before responding, people start listening before you even speak, because silence makes others anticipate value. Think of it this way. If someone is constantly talking, the brain stops assigning importance to their words. It's just background noise. But when someone who rarely speaks suddenly decides to, everyone leans in. That's not coincidence. It's conditioning. The scarcity of speech increases its perceived power. This is the same reason great leaders, negotiators, and strategists all understand the timing of silence. It is not that they don't have things to say, it is that they understand silence says them better. There's a psychological bias called the scarcity effect. It suggests that we value things more when they appear limited. Apply that to communication, and you get the psychology of presence. The less accessible you are, the more people assume your value, even in attraction. Silence has an uncanny influence. Mysterious people captivate because they give you fragments. Never the full picture. Your mind fills the blanks with fascination, curiosity, and even desire. The silence becomes an emotional canvas, and others start painting their fantasies on it. This is why the truly confident don't chase validation. They don't fight for attention. Their stillness creates it. Because silence sends a message. I am comfortable in my own space. I do not need your reaction to confirm my reality. That kind of composure feels like power. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the quiet kind that unnerves everyone else. It's the same reason people fear judges, interviewers, or commanders who listen without comment. Their silence says, I'm assessing you. I'm not competing for space, you are. And that's the secret. When you master silence, you stop reacting and start directing. The conversation begins to orbit around you, not through your effort, but through your restraint. Presence isn't built by what you say, it's built by what you can hold back. How to use silence as a psychological weapon. Silence becomes dangerous when it's intentional, when it's not avoidance, but awareness, because silence, in its most refined form, is not about saying nothing. It's about saying only what matters. And there are a few situations where silence becomes a weapon sharper than any word you could speak. In conflict, when tension rises and emotions boil. Most people rush to defend themselves. They explain, justify, attack back. But the silent person, they change the entire rhythm. They remove the oxygen from the argument. They make the other person feel exposed, irrational, even childish. The louder the other becomes, the calmer you remain. And that calmness burns them alive, because silence mirrors their chaos back at them. Eventually, they lose control trying to break yours. That's when power shifts. In persuasion, silence is leverage. In negotiations, silence after an offer makes the other person uncomfortable enough to fill it, usually by improving their terms. In conversations, a pause after a statement makes your words echo longer. It forces people to think deeper, to internalize. They start convincing themselves of what you just said. When you use silence strategically, people don't just hear your words, they feel them. In attraction, silence creates mystery. Mystery creates obsession. In relationships, the more predictable you are, the less interesting you become. But when you speak with precision, when you can leave a question hanging, when you can smile and say nothing, you invite curiosity. You turn from a participant into a puzzle. And the human mind cannot resist puzzles. In control, silence separates emotion from reaction. It gives you space to see patterns others are too loud to notice. When someone tries to provoke you, your silence tells them they have no access to your peace. It frustrates manipulators because they feed on reaction, and you've starved them. That's the purest power of silence. It denies the world your energy. You decide when, where, and to whom you respond, because once you realize that silence isn't empty, it's full of direction. Tension, meaning you stop fearing it, you start using it. Every pause becomes a statement, every breath becomes punctuation, every absence of response becomes a boundary. That's what most people never learn, that silence, when controlled, becomes a language of its own, a language that only the powerful speak fluently. The philosophy of silence. Silence is not for the weak. It's for those who have already fought their inner wars and won. Because when you're young in mind, you think power means volume. You think being heard means being understood. You think control means dominance. But real power is composure. Real confidence whispers. It doesn't scream. Silence is the proof that you no longer need to prove. When you stop reacting to every insult, every challenge, every attempt to draw you into chaos, you stop living as a puppet of other people's emotions. You start living as your own center of gravity. That's when silence stops being a weapon against others and becomes protection for yourself. It protects your peace from provocation. It protects your focus from noise. It protects your energy from people who drain it just to see if they can. You realize that you don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to explain your worth to people who were never meant to understand it. Because the loudest room is usually the most insecure one. And the quietest person inside it is often the most certain. In the end, silence teaches you one simple truth. What's loud isn't always strong. And what's quiet isn't always weak. When you can sit inside your silence without anxiety, you've won the battle that most people never even fight. Because silence, at its highest form, is not absence, it's awareness. It's not retreat, it's restraint. It's not emptiness, it's mastery. So, the next time someone tests your patience, disrespects your peace, or underestimates your stillness, remember this. You don't have to answer noise with noise. You can let silence do the talking, and it will always speak louder than words.